Здорово всем, с вами Мэтт. Сегодня мы с вами начинаем играть в игру под названием Стэнли. Сейчас я убавлю, то как загромковато. Так, да, давайте. Вроде нормально. Чуть-чуть прибавлю, а то слишком тихо будет. Так, в общем, начинаем. Сразу скажу, что я эту игру уже пытался снимать, но что-то у меня там вылетело. Попробуем еще раз. Сразу скажу, спасибо вам уже за 31 подписчика. Спасибо, 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 спасибо. Извиняюсь, что так долго не снимал. Вчера хотел. Товарищ пришел, меня отвлек, гадина. Но сегодня, возможно, выйдет даже 2 видео. Возможно, даже кооператив. Ну что, сказал, давай завтра в GTA поиграем. То есть уже сегодня. Хотя если он придет, это будет хорошо. Уже, в принципе. В общем, эту игру я проходил. Здесь много разных концовок. Игра интересная. Всем посоветую поиграть и в первую, и во вторую часть.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day, something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
Сейчас убавлю, а то как-то громковато, мне кажется. Так вот убавлю. Ну, эта игра будет, наверное, на несколько серий. Несколько серий, типа, поэтому если что прибавлю, если что убавлю. Вот так вот. Все. Так, я хотел сказать, что поиграем во вторую часть, если мне удастся ее старым так как скачать как-нибудь нормально.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Я сразу скажу, читать не буду, слишком много текста, я еще медленно читаю, могу что-то не так прочитать. Короче, лучше, если я буду просто молчать, когда будут эти субтитры. Так, интересно, конечно, у нас работа, но вот с происшествием, конечно, странно. Так, никого нет, все открыто. Ну, где только можно. Закрыто. Никого нет. Где, куда все делись? Это как-то невежливо бросать меня тут в одиночестве.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Пока что мы будем слушаться указаний нашего рассказчика, нашего наратора. Потом мы будем совершать саботажи и
Yet there was
слушаться его.
not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Так. А что закрыто? Странно.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Shocked, unraveled, Stanley wondered in disbelief who orchestrated this, what dark secret was being held from him. What he could not have known was that the keypad behind the boss's desk guarded the terrible truth that his boss had been keeping from him. And so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number, 2845. But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this.
Я специально не вел сразу, как он сказал, потому что он бы заставил слушать музыку.
Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway.
Парки я только вспомню, если я не забуду, конечно. ценники. Тут что там можно будет это? Ага, больше нельзя. Интересно. Так, погнали, погнали. Будем открывать кусок моей прохождения. Я примерно помню, где какие. Сначала будем в одну сторону ходить, все открывать, потом в другую. Вот так, в общем. Все и посмотрим. Везде и повеселимся. Тут есть еще ачивки, но я уже почти все выполнил. Кроме двух. Не играть в Stanley первые 5 лет и играть весь вторник. К сожалению, у меня нет свободного вторника.
Stanley realized he felt a bit peculiar. It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him? This question would not go unanswered for long.
Я надеюсь, у меня игра не вылетит, потому что я просто случайно на
Stanley
папку
walked straight
Windows, у меня
ahead
все
through the
вылетело.
large door that read Mind Control Facility.
Так, написано выход, но мы не пойдем, потому что оратор сказал сюда шагать. В управление сознанием. Сюда, в комнату.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens.
Питание.
What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out?
Кажется, хватит. Я же Стэнли. Стэнли, значит, самый
Now the
полезный
monitors
компании.
jumped to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers. The lives of so many individuals reduced to images on a screen, and Stanley, one of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing.
Сейчас пойдем, пока не опять переключится на цифры. Ладно. А, вот все. Вон, да, наш кабинет.
This mind control facility, it was too horrible to believe. It couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's control all this time? Was this the only reason he was happy with his boring job? That his emotions had been manipulated to accept it blindly? No, he refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control? Never. It was unthinkable. Wasn't it? Was it even possible? Had he truly spent his entire life utterly blind to the world? But here was the proof, the heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions, happy or sad or content. Walking, eating, working, all of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
Так,
blackness and a rising chill of uncertainty. Was it over?
не знаю, получилось ли.
Yes. He had won. He had defeated the machine, unshackled himself from someone else's command. Freedom was mere moments away. And yet, even as the immense door slowly opened, Stanley reflected on how many puzzles still lay unsolved. Where had his co-workers gone? How had he been freed from the machine's grasp? What other mysteries did this strange building hold? But as sunlight streamed into the chamber, he realized none of this mattered to him, for it was not knowledge or even power that he had been seeking, but happiness. Perhaps his goal had not been to understand, but to let go. No longer would anyone tell him where to go, what to do, or how to feel. Whatever life he lives, it will be his. And that was all he needed to know. It was perhaps the only thing worth knowing. Stanley stepped through the open door.
Сейчас до конца откроется. Все, можем выходить.
Stanley felt the cool breeze upon his skin, the feeling of liberation. the immense possibility of the new path before him. This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
Вот и хорошо. Все, прошли. И это только одна из множества концовок в этой замечательной игре. Так, что ж, по новой.
But Stanley simply couldn't handle the pressure.
Ладно.
What if he had to make a decision? What if a crucial outcome fell under his responsibility? He had never been trained for that. No. This couldn't go anywhere except badly. The thing to do now, Stanley thought to himself, is to wait. Nothing will hurt me. Nothing will break me. In here I can be happy forever. I will be happy. Stanley waited. Hours passed, then days. Had years gone by? He no longer had the ability to tell. But the one thing he knew for sure, beyond any doubt, was that if he waited long enough, the answers would come. Eventually, someday, they would arrive. Soon, very soon now, this will end. He will be spoken to. He will be told what to do. Now it's just a little bit closer. Now it's even closer. Here it comes.
Ну да. Это не я сделал, это игра сама перезапустилась, если что. Все в порядке. Так, ладно, не нажимаем, я это вообще не хотел делать. Но,
All of his
ладно.
co-workers were gone. What could it mean?
У нас две
Stanley
концовки.
decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had
Сейчас
simply
будет
missed a
номер
memo.
3. О, получилось.
At first, Stanley assumed he'd broken the map until he heard this narration and realized it was part of the game's design all
Я
along.
смотрю, что не
He
потерял.
then praised the game for its insightful and witty commentary into the nature of video game structure and its examination of structural narrative tropes. So, now that you're here, what do you think? Isn't this a fun and unique place to be? Why don't we take a minute just to drink it all in? Okay, I'm over it now. What do you think? Are you sick of this gag yet?
А you sequels, как... Типа тебе надоели эта хрень? Да, нет. Нет. Меня все устраивает.
Ah, then in that case, we'll continue. But now, here comes the real question. What do you think would have happened if you had told me that you wanted this to stop? Do you think it would have been particularly different? Would I have taken the same idea but
Послушаем
rephrased it
оба варианта.
superficially to fit that answer? Perhaps you never would even have thought of it if I hadn't brought up the issue in the first place. Oh, now think about it. Will it be worth it for you to restart and then come back here just to do the other option? Clearly, this whole gag takes some time. What if the other option is even longer? How long will you spend in total just to have heard all the narration? Oh, and this is rich. Perhaps you've just played the other option, and now you've come to see what happens in this one. So, what do you think? Which choice was the better one?
Сейчас узнаю. какой
Imagine
вариант.
if you had selected continue on your first playthrough, how tantalizing it would be not knowing what happens when you pick the other option. Indeed, you are one of the lucky ones. Though if the other option is really miserable to listen to, then perhaps you're not. In fact, I'm just going to say that no one who's listening to this is lucky. Well now, I've built up the other option so much that I'm going to stop talking and leave you to your decision whether to come back here, continue with the game, or just sit in this spot forever and ever. Cheers.
Давай, пока. Так, все, да, мы ничего не можем сделать. Перепройдем. Так, начать. Там этот вариант с да, он покороче.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean?
Как
Stanley
каждый
decided to go
обязательно-
to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Ждем опять.
At first,
Мы должны
Stanley
всё
assumed he'd
послушать.
broken the
Такая
map
вот игра.
until he heard this
Такое вот
narration
прохождение.
and realized it was part of the game's design all along. He then praised the game for its insightful and witty commentary into the nature of video game structure and its examination of structural narrative tropes. So, now that you're here, what do you think? Isn't this a fun and unique place to be? Why don't we take a minute just to drink it all in? Okay, I'm over it now. What do you think? Are you sick of this gag yet?
Хохма, блин. Так, Да.
Well, I don't know how to say this politely, but you could literally just hit escape and restart the game any old time you want, like right now. You could have done it just then. Now would also be an appropriate time to quit. Any of these points and so many, many more, all of them are appropriate. I'm enjoying what seems to be an internal conflict going on where you are literally unable to act on your own desires to restart the game. So, just to push the envelope, I'm going to try and make this as miserable as possible and see how long you can maintain. There once was a man named Stanley, who people considered so manly. But the truth must be told, he was not very old and was quite particularly gangly. What Stanley liked most was buttons. He pushed them like some kind of glutton. He did it all day in a meaningful way, but his brain had long ceased to function. Which is why he is in this parable and lives an existence quite terrible. And if you are not strong and keep playing along, you too will become quite unbearable. Yes. You too will become quite unbearable.
Спасибо, запись. Так, понимаю, даже будет просто звуки гитары. Так, ладно, все. Сюда мы больше не вернемся. Телефон? Телефон. Алло?
Good morning. Thank you for contacting the Future Happiness Foundation. We are confirming your shipment of 1,327 cardboard boxes to your place of work. Can you verify that this is correct? Excellent. Your order will arrive shortly. Thank you again for contacting the Future Happiness Foundation.
Ни хрена не понял. Че там бакланит? Так, ладно. Сейчас сделаем еще одну концовочку. Так, начать игру сначала. Все, погнали. Сейчас нужно будет немножко походить по зданию. Мы сейчас будем потихоньку разбираться со всем, что здесь появляется.
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
А мне надо в эту сторону? Или... Да, мне надо. Черт, ждем. Тут иногда меняется почему-то пространство. Если вот много раз перезапускать, будут разные офисы.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Так, включено. Начать игру сначала. Это тоже одна из концовок. Сейчас мы все пройдем вообще.
Just a step through this door, Stanley thought to himself, that's all I need. If I can make it through this door, I can make it through them all.
Так, куда теперь? Сейчас... вспомнил куда. Сейчас нам нужно в кабинет начальника.
When Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door on his left. Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his bosses. Stanley stepped into the broom closet, but there was nothing here, so he turned around and got back on track.
Нет, не пошел. Я меняю историю, я Стэнли.
There was nothing here. No choice to make, no path to follow, just an empty broom closet. No reason to still be here.
Бедный рассказчик.
It was baffling that Stanley was still just sitting in the broom closet. He wasn't even doing anything. At least if there was something to interact with, he'd be justified in some way. As it is, he's literally just standing there doing sweet FA.
Да вообще. Как Стэнли так мог поступить? Вообще.
Are you really still in the broom closet? Standing around doing nothing? Why?
Надо.
Please offer me some explanation here. I'm genuinely confused.
Нет, я не пойду никуда. Все, иди нафиг отсюда. Это мой чулан, я теперь...
You do realize there's no choice or anything in here, right? If I'd said Stanley walked past the broom closet, at least you would have had a reason for exploring it to find out. But it didn't even occur to me because literally this closet is of absolutely no significance to the story whatsoever. I never would have thought to mention it.
Просто стоим в чулане.
Maybe to you this is somehow its own branching path. Maybe when you go talk about this with your friends, you'll say, "Oh, did you get the broom closet ending? The broom closet ending was my favorite." I hope your friends find this concerning.
Тут так пишется, почему столько грамматических ошибок?
Stanley was fat and ugly and really stupid. He probably only got the job because of a family connection. That's how stupid he is. That or with drug money. Also, Stanley is addicted to drugs and hookers.
Ты прям вообще меня описал. Один в один. 100%.
Well, I've come to a very definite conclusion about what's going on right now. You're dead.
Я помер.
You got to this broom closet, explored it a bit, and were just about to leave because there's nothing here, when a physical malady of some sort shut down your central nervous system and you collapsed on the keyboard. Well, in a situation like this, the responsible thing is to alert someone nearby so as to ensure that your body is taken care of before it begins to decompose. Hello? Anyone who happens to be nearby? The person at this computer is dead. He or she has fallen prey to any number of your countless human physiological vulnerabilities. It's indicative of the long-term sustainability of your species. Please remove their corpse from the area and instruct another human to take their place at the computer, making sure they understand basic first-person video game mechanics and filling them in on the history of narrative tropes in video gaming, so that the irony and insightful commentary of this game is not lost on them. All right, when you've done that, just step out into the hallway.
Не, еще не поменяли. Нам скоро завезут нового. Сейчас подождем чуть-чуть и потом пойдем. Ну, я жду. Че тупим? Давайте подвигайся, чтобы он видел, что новый человек за компьютером. Ладно, так уж и быть, рассказчик.
Second player. It's good to have you on board. I guarantee. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Так, ладно. Мне вообще не в чулан надо было, но зато послушали. Так, выполнено. Сколько еще? Осталось 2. Кстати, еще сюда могу зайти. Ага, открыто. Так, Ivy got the feeling money is for stealing, but not you, of course, say that's all of course. Интересно. Надеюсь, я правильно прочитал. Так, это мы ввели, сейчас пойдем. О, открыто. Ах ты, гадина, панду заставить решил. А вот то, что у нас на превьюшке игры, когда на рабочем столе. Так, заходим, поехали. Подпевает. Что происходит с экраном? О, мы приехали. Ясно. Это все обманка. Ладно, я сам нажал. Ничего не будет, если мы там будем хоть 3 часа стоять, хоть 5 дней, то ничего не произойдет. Мы просто будем гнать тут. Нас будет просто трясти в лифте. Так, осталось 2 компьютера.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Так, а где? Так, стоять. Где еще один компьютер? А, вот.
No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace. Stanley went around.
Ах ты. Гадина. Зря ушел я. Погнали.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean?
Уведи еще.
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Что такое?
No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his
нажал.
co-workers.
Странно, как-то не нажималось. Все, остался последний компьютер. И он у нас в кабинете. Опа. Нет, так, если я выйду, закроется. Видимо, здесь просто везде бумажки раскиданы. А что там? О, там вообще не читаем, к сожалению. Все, врубили. Все, мы ввели то, что от нас требовали. Добро пожаловать, Стэнли. Сейчас посмотрим в переводчик, что такое. Я же не англичанин. Ну, чё не переводим? Блин. Типа небеса. Типа рай, короче. Типа мы померли, и вот наш рай. Мы можем ходить, нажимать на кнопочки. Да, интересно, конечно, у Стэнли рай. Но здесь прикольно просто стоять и слушать. Не знаю, мне лично так. Ладно, это мы сделали. Начать игру сначала. Погнали. Так, теперь мы уж наконец-то пойдем в правую дверь. И там... А, опять звонят. Алло.
Hi, Stanley. Just wanted to leave you a message to let you know
Пока.
there's a few things I need you to pick up on your way home from work today.
Ага.
We need milk, cereal, dish soap, spaghetti, get a thing of sugar, some bread, and coffee beans, whichever
Это
ones you
список
like.
продуктов, кто
I'll give you a call if there's anything I forgot. Thanks, sweetie. See you tonight.
Чё? Чё в конце там промычали? Ладно. Так, идем дальше. Собственно, кто-то играл в косынку, а меня не позвали. Вот гадин. Так, я смотрю, тут мало ли
When Stanley came to a set of two open, this was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it. Ah, yes, truly a room worth admiring. It had really been worth the detour after all, just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate, beautifully constructed room.
Холодные напитки.
Stanley simply stood here, drinking it all in.
Да, стоял у кофейника с кружкой.
But eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
Так, тут у нас куча разных вариантов. Походу, из несколько серий будет проходить, ну, разумеется. Я имею в виду правую часть. Так, давайте начнем с первого,
Stanley
самого
was so
простого.
bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago.
На коробочке, чтобы помягче
But in
было.
his eagerness to prove that he is in control of the story and no one gets to tell him what to do, Stanley leapt from the platform and plunged to his death. Good job, Stanley. Everyone thinks you are very powerful.
Ух ты, кто-то меня считает мужчиной. Так, куда теперь, чтобы побыстрее было?
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Так, я что-то не помню, где здесь самый короткий такой путь есть.
When Stanley came to a set of two open, this was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first,
Тут
just
много
to admire
вариантов,
it.
и они все длинные такие.
Wow. Yes, this room. But eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
Вспомнил.
And so he detoured through the maintenance section, walked straight ahead to the opposite door, and
Он
got
еще слева
back
все
on
закончится
track.
тогда и не парится.
Yet there was not a single person here
с
either.
левого варианта.
Feeling a wave
влево
of
дверь пойдем, там
disbelief,
сделаем кое-что.
Stanley decided to go up to his boss. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Так, мы вниз пошли.
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss. Admitting he had left his post during work hours, he might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all? None of it made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words for it. I'm dreaming, he yelled. This is all a dream. Oh, what a relief Stanley felt to have finally found an answer, an explanation. His co-workers weren't actually gone. He wasn't going to lose his job. He wasn't crazy after all. And he thought to himself, I suppose I'll wake up soon. I'll have to go back to my boring real-life job pushing buttons. I may as well enjoy this while I'm still lucid. So, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground.
Верните меня.
Then he imagined himself soaring through space on a magical star field, and it too appeared. It was so much fun, and Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so lucid? And then perhaps the strangest question of them all entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself sooner. Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Now the voice was describing itself being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly strange. I'm dreaming about a voice describing me, thinking about how it's describing my thoughts, he thought. And while he thought it all very odd and wondered if this voice spoke to all people in their dreams, the truth was that, of course, this was not a dream. How could it be? Was Stanley simply deceiving himself, believing that if he's asleep, he doesn't have to take responsibility for himself? Stanley is as awake right now as he's ever been in his life. Now, hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley. After all, he knew for certain, beyond a doubt, that this was in fact a dream. Did the voice not see him float and make the magical stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just... He would prove it. He would prove that he was in control, that this was a dream. So he closed his eyes gently, and he invited himself to wake up. He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin, the press of the mattress on his back, the fresh air of a world outside this one. Let me wake up, he thought to himself. I'm through with this dream. I wish it to be over. Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please, it's all I want. I want my apartment and my wife and my job. All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been. My life is normal. I am normal. Everything will be fine. I am okay.
Нет, не в порядке.
Stanley began screaming. Please, someone, wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss. I have an office. I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real. I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I? And everything went black.
Ой. Видимо, меня за то, что я ору, кто-то тюкнул хорошенечко.
This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, gathered her belongings, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. And although she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments she considered the strange man. He was obviously crazy. This much she knew. Everyone knows what crazy people look like. And in that moment, she thought to herself how lucky she was to be normal. I am sane. I am in control of my mind. I know what is real and what isn't. It was comforting to think this, and in a certain way, seeing this man made her feel better. But then she remembered the meeting she had scheduled for that day, the very important people whose impressions of her would affect her career, and by extension, the rest of her life. She had no time for this, so it was only a moment that she stood there, staring down at the body. And then she turned and ran.
Так вот. Грустненько. Ну что ж, ладно, все, на этом пора будет уже заканчивать, раз уж мы пропили опа опять. Сейчас я просто посмотрю, куда ведут эти бумажки.
Already this was uncomfortable, and Stanley decided that as soon as he found a new space he felt safe in, that he would never leave it again in his life.
Чего там он промычал наш рассказчик? Так, ясно, понятно, здесь заканчивается. Превьюшку, срочно превьюшку, срочно найдите мне превьюшку, пожалуйста. Опа, компьютер на превьюшечку, это же просто прям удар с небес. В общем, на этом, пожалуй, закончим. Я надеюсь, это видео вам понравилось. Если это так, то ставьте лайки, подписывайтесь на канал. Если это видео по каким-то причинам вам не понравилось, то обязательно напишите в комментариях, по каким же причинам. Мне будет очень интересно знать. Также, если вы не хотите пропускать новые видео, то жмите на колокольчик. Вот это все вы, дорогие. Что ж, всем спасибо за просмотр. Всем пока.